engage with brands that they know, like, and trust. Consistency is important for brand recognition. Why would I engage with them if they don't seem to know what they're doing? There's a level of professionalism that comes with being consistent.
You actually helped us come up with the Gambit branding that is today. So how do you feel about a platform like Canva where everyone feels as though they can be a graphic designer?
That's such a good question, because I think, and I'm so sorry to Canva, actually I adore Canva.
How does creating a brand or having a solid brand affect consumer behaviour?
You need to have that strong foundation and that strategy behind your brand so that you can connect with the audience. You need to know what you're saying, what you're selling, why you're selling it.
A top brand for you that stands out from a design point of view?
Okay, well, my favourite is Who Gives a Crap. Their mission is amazing, their values are amazing, and you can't engage with that product without knowing exactly what it is.
If there is people that are sitting there being like, we need to rebrand or we need to come up with a brand for this business idea that we have, what is 3 pieces of advice for people that are looking to start their brand from a design point of view?
I think the number one is
Jess, welcome to Top of Mind. I am excited to be sitting here with you today because you were one of the very first people that were involved in my business from the outset. You obviously are a graphic designer by nature, and you actually helped us come up with the Gambit branding that is today. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see you. It's been a while since we've hung out in person, so it's lovely getting away from the screens, getting in person.
And you're fresh back in Melbourne.
Yes.
You had a stint over in Mexico, which is where we kind of reconnected. I suppose our background is we went to university together.
Yeah, back in the day.
Shout out Charles Sturt University in Bathurst. We obviously then went on and did our own careers and spent time in the industry and respective areas of it. Then you went over to Mexico and you were doing the freelance graphic design stuff. And then I reached out to you when I started Gambit. Well, it wasn't Gambit at the time. It was Hayley Westerby Marketing. And I was like, I desperately need to come up with a name, a logo. I just hired my first person and was like, this business needs to stand for something more than just me. And we started working on what the Gambit branding is today, which I feel like this is a bit of a full circle moment.
I know, it's great. I mean, that was a little while ago now, so it's great to see how the brand has, developed and everything since then and got to this point. This is awesome. It's very exciting. It's exciting for me to watch you. I'm very proud of you, and it's lovely to be here.
I'm super excited. So a bit of context, I think. Let's just focus. Let's start on the brand, like how we started working together on Gambit, right? The process of it was I came to you and I was like, I need help. I need help with a name. I need help with a logo and some colours and some fonts that I resonate with. And all I really knew that I wanted was something that was punchy, something that was classy but punchy. I remember saying that to you like over and over again.
Yes.
And I remember saying that it needs to stand for something, like it needs to have a story or a meaning behind it. How many brands that you've kind of worked with really focus on having a meaning or a sentiment or a story behind their brand?
I mean, I think most brands that I work with have, well, at least a story. I think if you don't have a brand story, then, you need to create one because you need to draw inspiration for your brand based on like why you're there. And so a lot of the brands I work with have, like a strong sentimental value intertwined in some way, whether it's like just like a little symbol that they want to include or the idea was born from sentimentality or something like that. I think me personally, I work with a lot of brands that do play on emotion to connect with their customers. A lot of the brands I work with are kind of in that same way as you.
Same space.
And
then I also can appreciate, like when I started coming up with the name, I know that when we first spoke about it, we were kind of going through all these names, coming up with the different ideas. You obviously had a lot of great tools and like processes that we could go through to kind of come up with a name, like, taking words, splitting them, joining them together, like coming up with words that, resonate with the brand and, figuring out if there's a natural fit there. And I remember when we came up with one name that we loved. Both of us were like, yes, that's it. and it was lemonade.
Lemonade, yes. I know I'm still mourning that one, but I think, we got to a good one in the end. But yes, lemonade, I think we tried to work it out in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, there was just so much saturation with the word lemonade. And, especially with naming, you need something that's unique, something that's memorable, something that represents you.
Yep.
And as lemonade was already taken, even here in Australia, I think there was like another marketing agency that
like 4 months earlier.
Yeah. Oh gosh, the timing. That was taken. But I remember us being so sold on it. We were like, yes, we found it. That's so good.
And then I literally looked it up and I was like, I remember WhatsApping you being like, it's fucking taken. Gutted. And then we went back to the drawing board. Yeah. We came up with Gambit because Gambit was that chess move that was around kind of short-term sacrifice for long-term reward.
Yes.
Collective was like, I didn't want it to be corporate like group or company or blah, blah, blah. I wanted it to be like a collective of people and experts that were all coming together. And I think that, at the time I was like, does it work? Does it not work? And I think over the years I've never felt like it's worked more than it does.
Hey, just a quick one. If you are loving this episode, help us grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a review.
Yeah. I remember the way that we came to it. We were doing like a big brain dump and we were sketching out all these ideas on a big mind map. And we were drawing collaboratively all these little illustrations of signs and symbols and things that represented strategy. And we delved into, I think, like activities and like games that involve strategy, and like what better game than chess? It's like solely based on strategy.
Yep.
And the Queen's Gambit had just come out on Netflix, and so that was quite top of mind at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just a path that we went down quite naturally, which was really fun because the way we kind of came about it, wasn't as obvious as you would expect. We went in so many different areas. I think we went in the route of Beyonce, which is how we came to Lemonade and all of these things.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was just such a perfect fit.
Yeah.
And then when you came up with the tagline, that was just amazing.
Yeah.
What is the tagline again? Yeah, it's your move.
It's your move.
It's your move. Yeah. So when you came up with the tagline, it's your move. That just like tied everything in so well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you've just made it what it is. You were talking about earlier that you've got your Gambit girls and everything.
Gambit gang.
Gambit gang,
And I love it. I feel like it's come to life really naturally. Now, the reason that I wanted you to come on the podcast, I know that you said it originally, you're like, I'm not doing a podcast. It's not my thing. I would prefer to just be behind the scenes. But you're here, and I'm really glad that you are here because I think one of the things that we get all the time is questions around branding, building brand, building, the aesthetic layer of branding, not just there's the emotional layer that we obviously do in the background and, build that brand strategy, but then also the aesthetics of, what does my brand look like? What does my logo look like? What does it sound like? What does it, feel like when I interact with it? Now, I did a quick Google and search of some of the most Googled questions about branding. And I think we should just start with that because I think that will hit a lot of the questions that people have around branding off. The first one is, what is branding? Do you have like a generic outline or an understanding, your understanding of what branding is? Yeah,
so I think there's obviously a lot to branding and it is hard to summarize it in such a concise way because I think we could be here all day just talking about that question alone. Yeah. And I think if you do Google it, you can find, countless articles. But I think to summarize in the quickest way, branding is about building the perception of a brand. So how that looks visually, as you mentioned. So what's the logo? What are the colors? Are there any additional graphics? What's the typography that we use? Also, all of the verbal identity. So what's your message? What's your tone of voice? Do you have a tagline? What's your name? All of those things. So it's basically just the personality of a brand. Yeah. Who are you? What do you stand for? And what are you saying out in market?
I love it. Second question that was the most Googled is branding and marketing the same? Which is something that we get quite a lot of with people that don't know the difference between the two. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that?
Well, I think you can't have one without the other, but they are different. I think that they definitely go hand in hand. if branding is the personality or the toolkit of a brand, marketing is how you promote that message and where you promote that message. What do you say to your customers? Where do you say it? Is it on social media? Are you doing some paid advertisements? Is it word of mouth? What is that? So, yeah, I think they're definitely married, but they're independent.
They're separate houses.
They're doing their own thing.
Yeah, they're married, but they're living in separate houses.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, that's the third question I have here is, why is branding important for businesses or brands?
So people buy from brands that they know, like, and trust. So attaching branding to your brand enables people to become familiar with what you stand for. So you need to have consistency across all of your messaging and, all of your aesthetics and everything that you're putting out with that. And so that means that people can better engage. They can recognize you. If you're pumping out the same message over and over, they're like, okay, they know what they're doing. I know what they're doing. I trust them. They're standing by their values, and then people can engage with that brand.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, 2 more questions from Google. What is involved in a brand strategy?
So, a lot of research. So, doing market research, seeing what competitors are out there, what your competitors are doing, what your audience is doing, the buying habits of your audience, who they are, talking to people, figuring out what your mission is, your values, your purpose, all of the things, the brand story, like nutting out your brand story. So basically it's the foundations, like the building blocks of your brand. So like the how and the why before you get to the next level, which is doing the visual and verbal identity.
Yeah, I love that. Last question is, how does brand affect consumer behavior? This is something that I'm always so interested in because I love the psychology side of branding and marketing and business. So how does creating a brand or having a solid brand affect consumer behavior? And on the flip side, how does a weak brand or a brand that doesn't perhaps have all of their ducks in a row affect consumer behavior?
So I think, as we touched on earlier, people engage with brands that they know, like, and trust. So you need to have that strong foundation and that strategy behind your brand so that you can connect with the audience. You need to know what you're saying, what you're selling, why you're selling it.
I love it. Now, some of the things that we see all the time with our clients coming to us is they want to start their brand, but they perhaps don't have a huge amount of money to invest in it, or they're starting their brand on a budget. What advice do you have for people that are wanting to start but perhaps don't have the funds to invest in a graphic designer but need to kind of start somewhere?
Well, I think the key thing that you can do yourself is research. So read as much as you can. If you can't pay for a designer, then just starting out and just looking at your consumer. So who are they and where are they? And get really nitty gritty. And I think there's a lot of amazing tools online for like building a brand persona and building like your audience persona. So delving into that and figuring out the why first is the best way to go about that if you're on a budget and you're trying to do everything yourself. Because I think a lot of the time when you engage with a graphic designer, they're going to be doing a lot of that heavy lifting and that research. Yep. So if you can do as much of that and build out the basis of your brand and the how and the why, then I think after that you can try and figure out like how to engage in a designer. I honestly can't think of a way that I would recommend that's like effective to build a brand yourself in terms of the aesthetics, unless you have the skills and the know-how and the strategy. Yeah. If you are starting from zero and you don't know how to use a lot of software and you feel overwhelmed with like, all of that kind of stuff, choosing colors, choosing typography, I think it is obviously extremely beneficial to go with someone who lives and breathes that. Yeah. But definitely doing as much research as you can beforehand. And just Googling tools, like tools to figure out your vision, tools to figure out your mission and like, the differences between those and what is my purpose? Like, how do I promote that message? Just learning as much as you can. All of that takes a lot of time and obviously it doesn't compare to someone, like you or I that already have years of experience in the industry and know how to do that stuff. But if you're just starting out and you want to get your head around that stuff. I think it's really invaluable to know that anyway, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're being hands-on with building the brand or not. I think that stuff is really key.
I agree. And I think to your point, like it comes back to figuring out what it is that you can do yourself.
Yeah.
And then what is it that you can't do yourself and you need help with. And I think, that's like part of the reason that our business was born, was because it's like, there's a lot of people that can do 50% themselves and then they need help with 50%, or they can do 80% themselves and they need help with the 20%. So that's where we kind of come in. But then in that same respect, if you've got someone that comes to you and it's like, hey, these are our audience personas, this is who we're talking to, all I need your help with is coming up with a logo based on this mood board and this look and feel and these colors and these fonts that I like, but I'm not sure how they would work in my business. So pay the expert for what you need, and then you do all of the heavy lifting in terms of the research and actually deploying that brand and what it looks like and things like that. So I think that's a really good piece of advice to start with is, and it's the same as us, there's no point in paying for someone to do your paid social strategy if you don't have any money or you don't have any effort or time to invest in the organic content.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it kind of comes back to that same point. Now, one thing that we see a lot of when brands come to us and they've been working with perhaps another agency or another business or a freelancer for a while is that their branding isn't consistent. Like they have different fonts all over the place. They use different colors. It kind of makes my eyes twitch.
Yes.
There's no consistency between what you see on the website to what you see on the Instagram page to what you then see on their stories and, so forth. So if consistency is king when it comes to a lot of the things that, come to mind when it comes to marketing, with branding, why is consistency so important?
So consistency is important for brand recognition. If you are switching up your messaging all the time, if you're switching up your colors, if you're changing your logo and, doing all of these things that are inconsistent with like your core message, people are just going to get confused. You need to have a brand that is able to adapt across multiple platforms. So having things like having multiple logos in different lockups that look the same is super important. You can use them and adapt them across like, if you need to put something in your website and then if you need to use like a little icon on socials, but they still look the same, they're still the same brand.
Yeah.
It means that people can follow along and look at that at a glance and be like, okay, I know who's talking to me. I know where they're coming from, all of that. And so just something that I really love doing is coming in and working with brands that have been operated within like a really small team and they've kind of been around for a little while and they haven't had, like a big budget to get off the ground, and then doing a rebrand with them and making sure that consistency is key. That is really enjoyable for me because I think in general in life, I really like being able to see, like make things look similar in general. I really like that in like my personal life. So just for me personally, that's like one of my favorite parts of the job is like coming in and being like, okay, we're just going to get all of these elements and just like make them look like it's the same person.
They're part of the same family, right?
Yes.
I think that's so important as well. Like consistency for me, whether it's consistency in message, whether it's consistency in colors, like one of the things that become glaringly obvious for me when it comes to brand is that if I go onto someone's Instagram and I'm like, oh, cool, like they're using all of these colors, that's great, like that's the font. Then I go onto their website and it's different.
Oh my gosh, no.
There's the immediate eye twitch, but there's also the immediate sense of like, I don't trust this brand because they're not the same. And I'm like, is this the right website? Am I in the right place? Am I, is this something that I should trust? So I think there's that automatic like hesitancy that comes with the inconsistency in branding. And it's the same as, if you were following a person that one day was talking about one thing and being really passionate about one thing, and then the next day they were like super inconsistent and talking about something, completely outside of that. And you're like, hang on, you were saying this yesterday and this the next day. And the trust is automatically kind of dwindling the moment the consistency is not there.
For sure. I also think there's a level of professionalism that comes with being consistent. If you look like your message is muddled or your assets are all muddled, people are going to look at that and think,
you don't have your shit together.
Yeah, you don't have your shit together. This person is frazzled. This brand is frazzled and they don't know what they're doing. Why would I engage with them if they don't seem to know what they're doing? So definitely consistency is key.
I couldn't agree more. Now, when it comes to building a brand, what do you think is the most important thing to consider when it comes to branding?
Knowing your audience. Like, hands down, easy answer. I think if you don't know who you're talking to, there's definitely, it's really hard to form a strategy if you don't have a very, very clear idea of who you're talking to. So that is definitely my number one takeaway.
And where do you think people go wrong with defining their audience?
Trying to attract too many people. I think
Way too broad.
I think a lot of this comes with small business as well, because, you get excited about a product, you're just launching the market and you're like, I want to talk to everyone. I want to grab, this person and this person and this person. I want to grab all of their attention. But in doing that, you don't grab anyone's attention. There's like an analogy about, you try and throw 50 tennis balls at someone and you can't catch any. Yeah. It's like that. If you throw one tennis ball, it's easy to catch.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to target every single person on the planet to be successful. If you can find a niche and if you can find out what drives them, what are their buying habits, where are they, what are they doing, when are they online, when are they purchasing, then you're going to have a lot more success in your brand. So just narrowing that down and speaking to, one or two core audiences and like sticking to that.
I think it's so valid as well when you're talking about, I think far too often people go, I need to go niche, and they're like, I need to find a problem or an audience group that aren't currently being serviced. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not currently being serviced. It means that you could provide a service for that group of people. Because I think, far too many people come to me with business ideas where they're like, oh, this brand is already doing that, but I think I could do it better this, X, Y, and Z way. I'm like, so do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the golden nugget.
Totally.
If you can find something that no one else is doing or find an audience that isn't currently being serviced, you're literally sitting on a golden egg. Like, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like, it shouldn't stop you just because somebody else is already trying. And I think I use the saying all the time of like, when Instagram launched, you didn't look at Facebook and be like, well, there's already a social media network. Like, we're not going to do it. And it's the same as when we launched, like, there's hundreds of marketing agencies, there's hundreds of branding and creative agencies and social agencies. But the way in which we do things are different, and the way in which we work with our clients and structure our scopes of work are different, and it works for the client instead of working for us. And I think that was where our niche was in terms of being able to speak to a group of audience a group of people that felt as though they were being underserved with the current agencies in place. And then they would fall to going to a freelancer and then be let down, or, didn't have this, skill set or experience of a freelancer. They wanted a big agency and there was nothing in between. Yeah. And that's where we kind of that's where our idea was kind of born out of. Now, if there is people that are sitting there being like, we need to rebrand, or we need to come up with a brand for this business idea that we have, what is 3 pieces of advice for people that are looking to start their brand from a design point of view that you would give to people?
I think the number one is find your unique selling point, which goes back to what you're just saying, actually. Finding what you can do that no one else can do, or finding a market that you can service and no one else is servicing, or, something along those lines that makes you, and being individual, being authentic and promoting that authenticity. I think that is so key when working with a brand, being bold, being authentic, being yourself. There's so many brands out there, but there's also, such big audiences today. Like, there's space for everyone. And so figuring out who you are and why you do what you do and who you're talking to and honing in on that message, that is definitely my number one. My number 2 would be, in terms of design specifically, if you are a small business owner or a personal brand and you have an idea of what you want aesthetically when you go to, a designer, or if you are creating something yourself, don't be led by your personal bias, or don't be like closed in by your own personal bias. Because oftentimes people engage with brands that are memorable rather than something that's necessarily like aesthetically pleasing.
Yep.
So if you come into creating a brand and you're like, I just want something that's, you know, really beautiful and really clean and timeless, not that clean and timeless isn't something amazing to go with, that's great. But if you, I think, are held onto the idea of sticking to aesthetics over strategy, then you're going to come into like a lot of roadblocks and you might end up looking like a lot of other brands. So being bold and being unafraid to explore other options.
Hey guys, if you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the Q&A function on Spotify.
And so I remember actually back when I was studying design, I used the word pretty to describe one of my, or like what I wanted to come out of a brief. And I was like, I just really want to create something pretty. And my design teacher was like, I never want to hear you use the word pretty again. Like, you know, and she pointed out that some of the most memorable brands aren't necessarily what you would call like pretty, but they are memorable.
Yeah.
So what kind of brands can you draw with your eyes closed? You know, like you've got the Nike swoosh, you've got the golden arches of McDonald's, you've got the apple from Apple. They're not necessarily, you know, something that those owners might have had in, you know, in their mind as something they wanted to create, but they're super, super memorable. So yeah, ditching your personal bias, being open to exploring something that's not necessarily aesthetically pleasing first, unless that fits with your brand. And that's, you know, something that's like important and key to your brand. But if it's key to your brand, if it's key for your brand to create something, you know, ugly but memorable, go with it.
Yeah.
Be ugly.
Lean into it.
Lean into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just, you know, whatever your brand values are, if it's like funny or if it's, you know, exploring curiosity, lean into those rather than the aesthetics. That I think is something that, a discussion that I have a lot with a lot of my clients. And my third point would be, once the branding is done, stick to the style guide. And that comes back to consistency is key.
Yeah.
So if you have a style guide, if you have worked with a designer, they will give you a toolkit with all of your beautiful new brand assets and a style guide that is going to encapsulate everything that you've created. Just stick to it. I know that it might be like alluring to or tempting to, you know, try out like a new gold color or try out like a new mint green.
Don't.
If it's not, if it's not in your brand style guide, get away from it. Stick to the style guide. And if you are struggling with sticking to that style guide and rolling out that brand with consistency in mind, get some help. Either get someone to run through and create you some templates. Something that I always find really useful, especially working with small business owners and individuals, is setting them up in a tool like Canva. That's a really easy to use, setting them up with a bunch of templates. And they can literally just go in and change things as they like, but the colors are all in there, the fonts are all in there, the logos are all in there. You can't kind of mess around with that stuff too much. So that is something that's really useful when coming to building a brand from a design perspective.
I love it. Now, it's something that I'm really curious about. As a designer, you obviously have a huge skill set that you've, you know, gone to university and learned about. You've spent years honing in your craft of, you know, understanding various platforms and software and things like that. How do you feel about a platform like Canva where everyone feels as though they can be a graphic designer?
Oh, that's such a good question because I think, and I'm so sorry to Canva. I adore Canva. In the beginning, I was very hesitant.
Yeah.
I was such a strict, you know, like Adobe or nothing kind of gal. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, you know, everyone's just trying to do their own design stuff. But I am proud to say, like, I've come completely full circle. I think it's an amazing tool.
Yep.
Especially in this day and age where so many people are coming up with their own like little side hustles or something, and they might not have the resources to hire a full-time designer or anything, and you know, be able to do that stuff themselves. It enables them to do that stuff themselves, which is awesome, and it has so many incredible templates and things. I do think it is super valuable to engage with a designer first, to come up with those assets, put them into something like Canva, and then you to take that and roll that out yourself. So I'm a big fan.
I agree. I think we obviously have clients that come to us asking for brand help and things like that, and I think that whilst Canva does do a lot, there's certain things that you just can't do in Canva, and I think that's where a skill set of someone like a graphic designer that has lived and breathed branding and design for a really long time can come into play. Like, there's no way that I would have come up with my logo, as simple as it is, in Canva.
For sure.
Like, I needed somebody to be able to go, hey, did I ever think that my brand would be green? No. Or like sage. I think we called it Gambit Green.
Oh, well, whatever
again,
works,
that never crossed my mind. Like, it's only after 3 years of running the business that people are like, yeah, that's the Gambit Green. Like, that's what I recognize it as. And I think that our brand wouldn't be where it is today had we not have engaged somebody that understood design and graphic design the way that you did. So I think whilst we use Canva for so much, there's certain things that Canva can't do. And I think that you're right in the sense that being able to utilize it so that it helps brands stay consistent with their templates and things like that can actually be very beneficial to branding.
For sure.
But there's certain things that it can't do. I say they, like it's a person, like all these little people working behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people behind the scenes at Canva, so it's accurate.
There's a lot of things that Canva can't do, but there's also a lot of things that they can do. So like leaning into Canva when it works for you. But I think as well, like just because you have the tools of Canva doesn't mean that you're an amazing designer. Like I've seen some shocking Canva designs that I'm like, wow, you had like thousands of templates at your fingertips and this is what you came back with?
I mean, I could have a lot to say about that, but I feel
Please
like
do. Let's be controversial.
I mean, obviously, as a designer, it's hard to see that sometimes.
Yeah.
But also, I understand that not everyone has a budget, and also not everyone necessarily cares about aesthetics as much as, a designer would.
Yeah.
But I think with something like that, it all depends on what kind of an impact you want to make. Impact and budget, really. Like if you are low on budget, then obviously go forth. If it's no good, then if you think it's good, then whatever. But I think it's helpful to definitely, if you can, get a designer on board, get someone to create something that is unique and uniquely your brand and knows your brand inside out and help to build your brand. I think that there is such impact in that. And yeah, if you want a lot of success and if you want to target particular people and really achieve as much as you can in the space that you can, it's invaluable to hire someone that can help you do that. There's some pretty hideous designs out there, I will say. But yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And I think the more brands that I work with, and also the more brands that I interview on this podcast, the more I'm learning that brand is the pivotal point for them. Like I interviewed Josh Mildren, who's the founder of Revel, which is a gym franchise. They've got 30 locations, and they've actually just come out this year saying that they're going to franchise less and focus on brand more. And that's the thing that is going to get them the competitive edge, because so many gym franchises are looking to just grow.
Yeah.
But he's like, actually, the thing that people love most about our business is the brand and what it stands for and the community that we build. And so he's like, that's the thing that we should be putting money into, which is just, I think that was episode 4. So I think, there are more and more businesses and brands that are leaning into the branding side of it more than anything else. Now, if there is, any kind of key brands that stick out for you when it comes to design, what are some a top brand for you that stands out from a design point of view?
Okay, well, my favorite is Who Gives a Crap.
Okay.
I think that they do such an amazing job of being memorable. They're bold, not only in their name, but all of their copywriting, in the way that they package their product. Their mission is amazing. Their values are amazing. And you can't engage with that product without knowing exactly what it is. You see the little rolled up toilet paper in, a cafe bathroom or whatever, and you're like, okay, cool, Who Gives a Crap. So I think they do an incredible job of their brand and being authentically them. They're not afraid
to
go against the grain. And that is something that I think is so, so, so invaluable and goes back to being authentic and being yourself. Those key things, like don't be like everyone else. Don't be like every other toilet brand out there that, shows like photos of like puppies and stuff on their packaging and, blending in with that crowd. And I've seen Who Gives a Crap grow so much more in like the last few years, and it's just like expanded, especially since leaving the country, living in Mexico for 5 years and then coming back. I remember it felt like it was quite niche back in the day, and now I'm seeing it really mainstream, and they're selling in Aldi and everything. So they are just like such an incredible brand that is just doing exactly what they believe in and doing it the way that they want to do it, and absolutely killing it. So be bold, be Who Gives a Crap.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also with that, it kind of ties nicely to, have you seen an example of branding gone wrong? I'm sure you have. Like, have you seen any examples of like, things that make your eyes twitch that when it comes to a design or branding point of view just haven't worked?
I think that goes back to what we were talking about before, about people trying to tackle things on their own without a clear strategy. I'm reluctant to single out any brands in particular, obviously, but I just think in general when you see people kind of like doing things by themselves and there's no real strategy behind it, and the message is changing up all the time, or the visuals aren't married to each other, I think that obviously makes my brain hurt. But each to their own. And I think, as we mentioned before, it's all about impact and how much success that you want to have within your brand. And I think taking shortcuts keeps you at a certain level, and if you do want to level up and reach more people and be the best at what you do, get help. Like, you can't do everything. None of us can do everything. Get someone in that knows what they're doing. That for me is just like the number one no for a brand, just trying to do everything yourself and not doing it well.
I think I literally got my phone out before because I was like, there's one that really stands out to me in terms of like design fell, and I remember having like conversations with like family, friends, like it just a repetitive conversation, and it was a government branding that there was I've just Googled it. It's called the Women's Network, and they launched this new brand for the Women's Network. And I feel like I can overlay it, or like, I don't know if we can zoom in on that.
Oh no. Yeah. The penis.
But it looked like a penis, and it's like the Women's Network.
Yeah. The penis. Yeah.
And it looks like a purple penis.
Yeah.
And it's just like, at what point, like the government, like I've worked with government bodies before, there is hundreds of thousands of levels of rounds of approvals.
Yeah.
It has to go through Jane, Bob, Joe, Dan, everyone before it even goes out to the execs to approve it. So there would have been so many eyeballs on this thing before it went out, and it still went out. And people were like, this is going to be great.
And I mean, I think that something like that, it's hard because they've obviously had a design team on that. And so I don't really know what the solution is in that sense, when like you have people that are dedicated to creating something incredible, and then as you said, you have like so many levels of approvals, and then it comes out looking like that. Ooh, so I don't know. That's a pretty bad one. I actually did just think of another one, which I don't think is necessarily a terrible move branding wise, but it was such a oh my gosh, I'm losing the word, like a
controversial.
No, like a backlash. Sorry. I just had an absolute brain fart. There was a massive backlash when the Daily Oz released their new font. They just did like a little brand refresh in like a few weeks ago or a few months ago. And they had a new font that they would use for their hero images on their social media tiles. And everyone was like writing under the comments like, we hate this font, we can't read, bring back the old font. And so they did. They actually were like, we heard you, we're going to bring it back.
Yeah.
But that, I think, is something that just wasn't tested enough.
Yep.
So it's unfortunate that they didn't kind of like, test it out, see how the readability score was.
Totally.
And yeah, that was just like a little fail. But I don't think that was just like, you know, the worst thing. They undo that pretty quickly, and it didn't ruin the integrity of the brand. It wasn't so different from their original branding that it was, you know, it felt like whiplash or anything when they switched back. It was pretty in line with what they looked like anyway. So it wasn't as bad as the Women's Network.
It's also not damaging, right? Like I think the Women's Network one you look at and you're just like, wow, how have hundreds of people seen this, looked at it and been like, nope, not a thought of a penis has come across my mind. Like how, when you launch it and it's the first thing that everybody sees. So I think there's an element of having like, yes, there's approvals, but obviously the Women's Network proved that you can have hundreds of thousands of rounds of approvals and stuff like that still slips through the cracks. You can have professionals engaged and they still end up with something like that. But then there's also that testing and the testability of, you know, whatever it is that you're launching to market. You know, at the end of the day, if you're serving a certain audience that are your niche or your core audience, they are going to have something to say about it anyway. So I think being able to be reactive off the back of something that you are launching and go, you know what, this isn't serving our audience and this isn't, you know, making for, you know, good branding or a good decision. And it's something that you can step back and go, we can change that.
For sure. And I think that does come down to testing, as you said. It is tricky because obviously we don't know the ins and outs of that particular case study, but I would be curious to see like who they asked to see that. And so that is something that is absolutely vital in the branding process, getting as many eyes on it as possible. However, just blocking out all the different voices in terms of, you know, oh, I like this color, I like this color, I don't like this. I don't think that is necessarily important. Like definitely try and drown out that noise, but test things to be like, does this look offensive? Is this telling a different story than what we want to tell? Asking those important questions when testing a brand before launching is so important.
And also not testing it in an echo chamber of yes people or people that are around you, right? Like I think for me, like even with our brand, like wasn't going to be controversial. It's, you know, certainly wasn't going to be going viral anytime soon. But I think that asking people that I didn't necessarily like know well or like or, you know, were friends with was really important for me because it's like I don't just want to be surrounded by people just saying, yeah, that looks great, like go you all the time. Like I want people to say if it doesn't look good to tell me. Like I'm that person that when I try something on, I'm like, I want you to tell me I look like shit if it's not right. So I think also being not in this echo chamber of like yes men all the time and being actually putting it out to a market that potentially would, you know, buy from you or trust you or know you or like you. Now, this leads me to like one of my last questions is around what trends do you think that we will see coming? Like you obviously live and breathe design. You know, I've seen even in the last couple of years the simplification of logos, you know, people going from like these beautiful, rich, like intrinsically designed logos to, you know, then going to straight sans serif font that's black and white. What trends do you think that are happening in the next kind of 6 to 12 months that if someone is looking to start a brand or rebrand that they can potentially look into and kind of focus on?
So I think something that we've seen post-pandemic has been a lot of like throwbacks. So a lot of vintage style typography, you know, 70s colors popping around. You know, obviously even in fashion, there's been like throwbacks to the 90s, to the 2000s, and that is being replicated in design as well. You've got like a lot of geometric patterns at the moment. And, you know, fun things like 2000s bubble text and, you know, people are playing, but they are being like quite playful. So I think that will continue. Also, I have seen actually a lot of contrasting colour being used as of late. People are leaning into accessibility and how that looks online, and that shows up in the form of like, you know, contrasting colours. So using like lots of pops of colours and like clashing colours. I think also with like the rise of, you know, the style of like craft beer, you know, you see like a lot more illustration, that kind of style that you see like in, you know, bottlers and stuff. Like it's just things are becoming more playful, and I think that now has bled out into other industries. So, you know, in cafes, even you and I got like a little coffee this morning. Even on the front of the facade, there was like all these like cool little like cartoons. I think that you're seeing like a lot more of that, and that will probably continue. And of course, AI assisted imagery, just using that as a tool in design. I think that it is such an invaluable tool, and it's such an amazing tool. So I definitely think we're going to see more like AI-led designs as well.
And before we go to the last kind of 3 questions, how do you feel about AI? Like, I feel like, there's a lot of fear around AI, and I think that's just simply because people don't understand what it is. Like, AI has existed in the world for a really long time. It's only in the last kind of 12 months that everyone's like, it's going to take your jobs. Yeah, but like it's existed, like even on Canva, for example, like the background removing tool is a form of generative AI
for sure.
that helps people remove backgrounds of photos.
Yeah.
So it's like AI has been around for a really long period of time. How do you as a designer feel about AI?
I love AI. I think it makes my job a lot easier. There are ways that I use it in the brainstorming process. Like if you need any assistance in terms of, just literally brainstorming in any capacity. You can kind of chuck a bunch of ideas into ChatGPT and then get them to expand that. I always try and use that as like a last resort in terms of brainstorming, because I don't want it to, cancel out any ideas that me myself would normally generate. But I think if you're becoming stuck, or you just want to move past like certain ideas and you want to generate more ideas, it's an amazing tool. It's really great in terms of like sketching out ideas or just like mocking something up really quickly. Like if you at a glance want to see how a brand will look, and you've got your colors and you've got your logo and you've got all your assets, and you just really quickly want to be like, okay, how does this look on a web page? You can chuck it into AI. It's going to generate something. I don't often give clients like a finished product that's like has any kind of AI on it, but it definitely helps along the way in the building process. And definitely things like that, like, the remove background tool. I think Photoshop is amazing. I spend about a quarter of the time that I used to in Photoshop now, just in terms of popping new imagery in and taking things out. It's really, really helpful. So it makes my life a lot easier, and I really love it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I constantly refer to ChatGPT as my business partner. I don't have a business partner, but like every time I have like a problem, or I'm procrastinating about something, or I need to start a scope of work or something like that, and I'm unsure as to how to phrase something or approach something, I'll pop it into ChatGPT, see what it spits out, and then I'm like, okay, cool. Like it's kind of given me the starting point, but I don't think it will replace a role, so to speak. Before we go to the final questions, just on that, with like generative AI in terms of generating photos and imagery and things like that, I know there are a lot of brands that are, going to market with these AI generated images that look really real, but they're able to generate images, 5,000 images in 48 hours, and it costs them a fraction of what it would to organize a shoot and things like that. Do you think that there should be any kind of like policing or identifiable kind of watermark or something that says that those images are created by AI? How do you feel about that? Like, I feel like there's an argument at the moment that's rolling out that's saying that if, I think it was Essie, the nail polish brand, they generated a campaign, I think there was like 2,500 images that they could use for social media that were all generated by AI, right? But then there's this argument that comes out that's like, yeah, but technically it's false advertising. But it's not, because the product is real. It's just the backgrounds that they've put these products in are generated by AI. So it's like there's this argument for saying we should have something that tells people that these images are not real and they're generated by AI. But then there's an argument for the fact that it's like, no, but it doesn't harm anyone by not telling people that they're not real. So where do you sit on that conversation?
I think it depends on how you use it. I think if you're using AI to generate images that display something that, as you said, like is not real or isn't an accurate description of your product, or compromises the integrity of the product, I think that I probably just don't do it. But if it's something like that where you're just like switching up backgrounds and you've got an image that you've taken of a real product that you have and then you're just placing it in different scenarios, I personally don't really find an issue with that. And I think you do need to be quite experienced to use those tools. It does take a certain level of skill and expertise to use those tools and to especially come up with results that look good enough to go to market. Even myself, like I'll try and whip something up as just like an idea for a client, or like, putting a product in a certain setting, and next minute there'll be like someone holding a bottle of something and they've got like 7 fingers. Like it happens all the time.
I mean, we saw it with the Kate Middleton stuff, right?
Yeah,
as well.
Literally, exactly. So I do think that you do have to be conscious when you are in charge of those programs to actually be using them correctly. I do think it's down to the individual and the, or the organization to be using those in a way that's not, showing something that's not real. Like, it's fine if you are using it correctly and you just, coming up with different ways to display something that already exists and something that you've already got and, you just want to kind of tweak it a little bit. I really don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that you need to say, like, this is AI generated unless it's something completely new. Then
Or
yes,
doesn't exist.
Or doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it's harmful, right? I think, like, at the end of the day, AI is great and I love it and we're leaning into it as a business and organization. We're working with clients that are leaning into it. But I think that at the end of the day, there has to be a human that is between the AI and what goes out to market, or between the AI and kind of, what people then see as like the finished product. And I think that human is in charge of what's right and what's wrong, and is this the best way to use it, and is this harmful, and those kinds of lenses that are applied to it. So I couldn't agree more. Now, to wrap things up, we've got quick fire questions. These are 3 questions that we ask absolutely everybody that comes on the podcast. The first question is, what is one brand that first comes to mind?
As mentioned before, who gives a crap? Always top of mind for me.
Amazing. Second is, what is one thing that you think helps keep a business top of mind?
Being authentic and unafraid.
I love it. And last but not least, because I'm a fiend for quotes, what is a quote that is always top of mind for you? And now this doesn't have to be something that's like, I feel like some people when they hear this question, they go, I need to be very like wise and just be like, it has some, very wisdom-based quote, but it doesn't. It can also be something that you kind of just remind yourself of daily that resonates with you.
So as you mentioned that, one of my favorite quotes that comes to mind, and I've just grabbed it. So it is by Irene Au. She says that good design is like a refrigerator. When it works, no one notices, but when it doesn't, it sure stinks.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a good one. It's going to go, I feel like years and years I've had friends be like, Hayley, you love quotes so much, like you should come up with like a quote book for like a
That's cute.
Living room table or something like that. And I feel like I want to do it with all of the quotes that I ask of people.
That's a great idea.
And I'm living for that one. That's such a good one. Jess, thank you so much for sitting with me. It has been so nice to chat, and it's hopefully not as scary as you thought it was going to be.
Thank you. I feel like I started a little rocky, but I definitely eased into it. You made me feel very comfortable. Apologize for me stumbling over some questions in the beginning. I was definitely shitting myself, but no, I had
Who
fun.
gives a crap? Who gives a crap?
Yeah.
One last thing from me before you go. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button or leave us a review wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast.